What's up, Swole Soldiers? Welcome to episode 20 of the Strength House podcast. Tonight we have very special guest, Mike Tuchscherer of Reactive Training Systems. We are going to talk about a well-rounded approach to powerlifting, looking at many different variables inside and outside the gym, as well as a host of other topics. We're reviewing two incredible stouts from Massachusetts-based brewery Trillium. You don't want to miss this episode, and thanks for sticking around all the way to episode 20.
The Strength House Podcast, featuring Greg Robbins and Tony Bonvecchio.
All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Strength House Podcast. This is episode 20, big episode. We made 20 episodes. Pretty impressive.
Who'd have thought?
They were betting against us, but we made it. I got Tony B here tonight. We have our producer, Irish Kate, in the studio. Former beer expert, Zach. He has been relieved of his duties. And we have newest CSP coach, John O'Neill, in here as well. And we have a really special guest tonight, Mike Tuchscherer. Mike, thanks very much for coming on the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're psyched to have Mike on, and we're psyched to have something a little bit different on the beer front. We've done nothing but IPAs minus one episode, and stouts are making their triumphant return. We got two great stouts, both pretty much from Trillium. We got a Trillium stout and then a Trillium collaboration stout, the first of which I'm really excited to try.
Yes, so I've been saving this in my half-ass beer cellar for a while, but we have the barrel-aged outside the lines Imperial Stout brewed with coffee, vanilla beans, and cardamom. So I'm pronouncing that right?
I think so, yeah.
I pronounce something wrong every episode. So what is cardamom? I see it all the time.
I have no idea.
I don't know. Mike, do you know what cardamom is?
Spices?
All right, we're going with it. That sounds good. All right.
You're good with lifting weights and that.
All right, so I'm going to crack this open with our signature Strength House 50 cal bullet here.
Hell yeah.
Turned into a bottle opener.
And
Pretty sweet little piece of equipment.
So, Mike, as we pour this first beer, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, what you do with Reactive Training Systems, and kind of what you do now as a lifter and a coach?
Sure. So, basically my full-time job these days is Reactive Training Systems. And there I'm a powerlifting coach / educator, I guess. We do a lot of education stuff through the coaching and through the classrooms that we teach. But coaching is something that's really fundamentally different than educating, you know, and I kind of, we can mix them when people are interested in mixing them, but some people want that, some people don't. So, you know, we try to do both things well. As a lifter these days, I'm, I guess I can say at this point, like I used to be a good power lifter. I still do all right in the bench press, but lately I haven't been training my squat or deadlift too much due to some injuries, but I've been focusing on front squats and some rowing movements and things like that, which has been kind of neat. It's been a neat learning experience for me to pick up something that is kind of a new skill again. But there's also a lot of transference, I think, from that to powerlifting. And then the practice of learning this new skill has been useful for me as a coach, I think, as well.
Well, I got to say, it's definitely an honor to have a lifter of your caliber on the podcast. You're definitely somebody who I think we both looked up to as a lifter. If you don't mind bragging about yourself a little bit, can you kind of fill in the listeners,
Sure.
like, you know, what are your best lifts? Like, what are some of the things that you've done on a national and on a world stage as a competitive powerlifter?
Sure. So squat-wise, my best raw squat in competition was 785. Depending on when these lifts were done, I always competed in the 120 or 125 kilo class. You know, so old weight classes would have been 125 and new weight classes has been 120. But for me, I've always weighed about the same, you know, middle 260s when I compete in terms of pounds. But so my best squat, raw squat, was 785. My best equipped squat was 903. My best Raw bench was 480. Best equipped was 633. And best deadlift, all my deadlifts were done raw. My best deadlift was 843. In 2009, kind of my claim to fame is I won the World Games, which if you're not familiar with the World Games, it's organized by the IOC. It's held once every 4 years. Powerlifting is in it. A lot of sports that are kind of Olympic hopefuls, I guess I would say, are in this event. And the way that you qualify for the World Games is they take the top however many Wilks scores from the World Championship. So it's kind of like a showcase meet of the best lifters at the World Championship. And they compete in super open weight classes based on a Wilks score. So I think at the time it was like 242s, 275s, and super heavyweights were all together in the heavyweight category, and they competed on Wilks. And I won that category. It was a really cool event too. It was probably the event that I most felt like a professional athlete at any point in my life. Just the level of attention to detail as far as them taking care of everything. Like I remember going to the training hall like a week before the competition, and they had volunteers there at the training hall who would load your weights for you. You know, I mean, just like crazy stuff like you don't expect, you don't even necessarily need, but you go, man, that's really nice.
Finally made it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you venue was like a capacity of like 3,000 people or something. It was sold out like weeks in advance. It was such a cool event to be a part of. So that was one of my big achievements, was to win that competition. I had some world records, some various world records. Probably the biggest or most noteworthy world record that I had was the world record deadlift for a number of years. Like I said, my best in competition there was 843. So yeah, it was good times. Hopefully we'll get back to that. Not throwing in the towel just yet, but just kind of taking it slow.
And you were an equipped lifter first before you competed mostly in raw, correct?
Yeah, so when I first started, raw wasn't a thing yet. But for me, like I always cared about my raw lifts a lot. And I always kind of said to myself, like, the reason that I keep doing the equipped stuff was because I was pretty good at lifting weights, and if you wanted to compete at an international level, that's how you had to do it, So when they started offering a Raw World Championship, I thought, man, that's exactly what I want to do, so I pretty much jumped into that with both feet. More recently, I guess that was kind of like a 6-year break, where I didn't really train equipped or even touch the equipment at all. But a couple of years ago, I thought, I ought to just do a training cycle with it to see how it feels. If I don't hate it too much, maybe I'll go to Equipped Nationals and just kind of see how things shake out. And actually, it was pretty fun. Like, I enjoyed getting back into the equipment. It had been such a long time. Ended up having a family emergency pop up kind of at the last minute, so I wasn't able to do the competition. But it was cool to me to see how quickly I got back into shape in terms of my equipped lifting. My squat probably wouldn't have been a PR, but it was getting close. I mean, after one training cycle, that's pretty good. My bench probably would have been a PR. Deadlift, not so much. I had some other things going on with my deadlift, but like I said, that was always a raw lift for me anyway. Could just never make a deadlift suit work for me,
Yeah. And a lot of guys say that, I think, like that.
Yeah.
Equip raw and can't get much out of a suit in a deadlift. Cool.
Right.
Could you speak to a little bit to like the name of your guys, your organization, is Reactive Training Systems? Could you speak to the reactive part of that and why it's called that, and another claim to fame, I would say, for you guys as well?
Sure. Yeah. So where that originated is we were, I guess I could say, probably the first, or at least one of the first to popularize RPE-based training for strength sports and for powerlifting in particular. And the RPE chart that you see floating around, that's a 10 RPE is a max effort, 9 RPE is 1 rep left in the tank, and stuff like that. That started with the work that I did when I was coaching the powerlifting team at the Air Force Academy. So Reactive is really kind of an allusion to the methodology that we use, and just kind of the overarching principle that we believe in, that training has to react to the athlete and not the other way around. The athlete, they bring what they can to the table, and the training has to be tailor fit for them. And you can't just shoehorn an athlete into training that's not fit for them and expect it to work out on any sort of a long-term basis.
Yeah. Well, that is a great explanation, I think, and something that we've come to use with a lot of our athletes. Anybody who's listening who trains with us and knows that we rely on RPEs quite a bit. We tend to combine them also kind of with percentages and assign a lot of percentage-based training. Do you assign percentages to your athletes? Do you often just go by, like, let's do a set of 5 at RPE 9? Like, how do you kind of mix and mingle the two?
Well, absolutely. And I think it's important to state that RPE is a tool, and like any tool, it's got its limitations. A hammer isn't useful for all construction applications, so RPE is no different. And if you understand what those operational limitations of it are, then you can employ it effectively. So for example, it's pretty easy to know when you do a max effort set. It's pretty easy to know if you've got 1 rep left in the tank, 2 reps left in the tank. If you start going beyond that, it gets harder and harder to tell. If you're rating sets around a 6 RPE, like, how sure are you that it's really a 6 versus a 6.5 or maybe a 5.5? Like, it gets really fuzzy down in that range, and it gets to be much more difficult to employ that tool effectively. And now if we take a step back and think, what's the point of training? What are we trying to accomplish with this training program? Well, we're trying to get the athlete to put the right weight on the bar and lift it the right number of times. Sometimes RPE is going to be a really useful tool to get them to put the right weight on the bar. Other times maybe not. So if you've got some like lower intensity, highly submax effort sets, then maybe just a percentage is a better way to just put the weight on the bar and move on. Being off by 5% even, which will be a pretty good day or a pretty bad day depending on which direction that swings. If you're talking about a triple at 80%, a 5% swing isn't going to result in a miss or an injury or anything like that, So the consequences of being wrong are minimal. So rather than, hand-wring over whether it's a 6 RPE or a 6.5 RPE, like, just put 80% on the bar and let's get on with it, So I would definitely apply percentages. We'll apply AMRAPs or whatever, depending on the circumstance. But we do use RPE a lot of times. Now, I'm definitely going long-winded on this, so.
That's all right. It's awesome.
One thing that I think people kind of misunderstand sometimes with the application of RPE is they'll think, well, I'll go into the gym, my goal is to do a triple at a 9 RPE, and they'll go in there with like no idea of what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and they'll just start putting weights on the bar, and that leads to some really haphazard performances. I would say that at a minimum, you want to target weight. You want to look at your past performance and say, okay, based on that past performance, this is what I ought to be able to do today, so that's my target weight. Now, as you're working up to that, absolutely be conscious of your RPE and adjust that target weight based on the day's actual real-world performance. But having something to aim at, it helps a lot, rather than, ending up with, 10 or 20 pounds under your capability or over your capability. It helps to dial in your weight selections a lot better. And if you're approaching this with kind of I call it a controlled aggressive mentality, you left to your own devices, all else being equal, you want to add a little more weight on the bar. You want to put an extra 5 or 10 pounds on there and hit a PR today. You want that aspect, but then you want to balance that aspect with the realism of like, well, if I'm working up and I see that it's not there, then I'm not going to do something stupid. Or if I'm working up and I see, hey, I'm having a really great day, because let's be honest, those should happen more often than not, then I'll take a little bit more than what that target weight was going to be, So that's kind of how I would use it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Do you find as the coach, if it's a coach and you're prescribing to an athlete, do you kind of help guide them on the target weight?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. So this is a thing that we're putting a huge amount of effort into developing right now, but we've got a free online resource. It's an online training log application. It's really becoming an online training management application. So if you go to reactivetrainingsystems.com and you log in, you click on apps, there's a whole suite of apps there available to anybody for free. And one large chunk of that is a training log. So you can log your training. Okay, most people get that concept. But to me, the real benefit, the real usefulness of a training log is that it needs to help you make better training decisions. So we try to put some tools in place to do that. So one thing that we have on there is a little button that opens a workout planner. And this workout planner, it looks at your training log history, and you tell it what your plan is today. So you'll say, today I'm going to do a triple at a 9 RPE, and it'll look at your training history and calculate what your target weight should be for that day, and you can use that to build your training plan. And then, you go and you execute the workout and you say, well, it wasn't a 9 RPE, it was an 8.5 RPE. So you'll log it, and then the next time that exercise comes back around, it factors that into the new decision as far as like helping you pick a target weight. So that's, one of the features here, but just having some tools in place to help people easily make a better training decision, that's huge.
I like that. Yeah. We talked before about the importance of tracking, different PRs, 1RM, 2RM, 3RM, different grips, different stances and stuff, and that sounds like a really awesome tool to be able to maybe keep better track of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's so much, right? Like I was telling you guys that I've been focusing a lot more on my bench lately, and it's been going really well. And one of the things that I would have to attribute that to is actually keeping and paying attention to my training log in this way. So one thing that we can do with that, we run these things we call block reviews. So every time we finish a training block, we go to the reporting section and queue up a block review. And a block review tells us several things. It tells us, one, how did we progress during that training block? Did we accumulate any fatigue? Did our body weight change or anything like that during the training block? And so you can see like, oh, I added 10 pounds to my squat, or I lost 2 pounds on my bench, or whatever the case might be. And then if you scroll down a bit, you can start to see the character of that training block. So what exercises did you use? What rep ranges did you generally focus on? What RPEs did you train at? Your overall volumes, and so on, right? So the idea is that every time you finish a training block, you run one of these block reviews. And then when it's coming up on time to train for a major competition, let's say you're going to nationals, and you go, this training block, this training cycle has to be a home run. Well, let's go back to your training log, and we'll pull all the block reviews, and let's look specifically at the ones where you performed the best. So this one, this one, this one. These are your greatest hits, okay? So let's look and see what commonalities there are, So like I know for me, I tend to respond best to higher intensity benches, which, a lot of people will respond to higher intensity benches, but I know for me, it's like triple at a 9 RPE and heavier seems to be something I respond really well to. I know what assistance exercises seem to have the most carryover for me. I know what volumes and rep ranges and all that stuff. So when it comes time to put one of those training blocks together, you basically play your greatest hits, and it's something that's really data driven, you know? So it's specific to you. It's the best kind of training information that there is because it's specific to you. Like, I love talking training, and we inevitably get to where we talk about, you know, training generalities, and that's really fun and cool. But when the rubber meets the road, it's got to be individualized to the person, you know, and that's kind of the system that I see as far as how to do that in real life.
That's awesome.
Greatest hits. I love it.
Get pretty worked up on block reviews, man. That's kind of a nerdy thing, but
you got to keep track of that stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, Mike, you've been and I think I referenced this when we do some of our powerlifting seminars. I always bring your name up in the sense of you're the first guy when I would read your stuff to just talk about like tracking everything. That if progressive overload is the name of the game, or making progress is the name of the game, you need to have a firm understanding of all the different places where you could start to make progress, because it's not always going to be simply the easy variables like intensity or volume or something like that.
Right, absolutely. Like dialing in the exercise selection, like that's a tough one because we can't quantify it in number form. It's not like volume or intensity where you can have a range of things that seem to be effective. Like there's a lot more thinking that goes into finding those exercises that transfer well, it varies a lot from person to person. Like I know that I have some lifters that get a lot out of pin squats, for example, but then other lifters just don't, and well, why? Because they're both weak at the bottom of the squat. They're both, they're both able, like it seems like pin squats would work for that, but one person responds, one person doesn't. Well, I think if you look a little bit closer, you can start to tease out those differences and start to understand what might be going on there. But again, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, this one person really responds well to it, and you know that, so you have to use that knowledge. And then this other person doesn't respond well to it. Maybe they do better with safety bar work or something like that. So you go in that direction.
That's awesome. I'm glad we're getting on the topic of exercise selection because I got a question about that. But I'm gonna hit the pause button for a second. This is exceptional. This is one of the best things we've had on the show.
This beer is really, really
definitely good. And Mike, I don't know if you're an IPA guy. You're out in Colorado on the West Coast, which has its fair share of exceptional beers. But like, this is just out of control. Yeah, really, really good. I've heard good things about Outside the Lines before, and Trillium usually gets it right in the IPA world, but God hit me.
There's a little bit left in this. So I'm gonna give you that.
I feel bad for the next beer that's got to go up against this. It's really not fair. But Mike, on the topic of exercise selection, so correct me if I'm wrong, but like kind of when you were at let's say your peak powerlifting performance, you were kind of well known for doing a lot of just the competition lifts. That's kind of the reputation that I understood that you had. If that's true, like has your exercise selection changed? Obviously it has because of injuries, etc. But what caused you to focus so much just on the competition lifts and kind of influence your exercise selection to do so?
Well, I think that's kind of a misperception of my training, and you're not the first person to suggest that, so maybe it's something that I was doing wrong, but my exercise selection paradigm hasn't really changed that much. Now, what I would say has changed is kind of the general tone of powerlifting coaching, and especially the people that I was and still am good friends with that were promoting a lot of training styles at the time really did focus hard on competition lifts only. And I think a lot of us have kind of moved away from that. So for me, I've always been kind of in this weird middle ground, right? So I'm not like, hey, train the competition lifts all the time. I definitely do include variations of the competition lifts, but at the same time, I'm not the guy who's like, let's do a lot of isolation work and bodybuilding stuff, So I'm kind of in this weird middle ground where, we might deadlift once a week and then do pause deadlifts and then do straight leg deadlifts. So from, like, on one hand, there's definitely more variation than from the people who do only comp lifts, but I mean, all three of those are really heavy variations. You know, they're all, you know, some permutation of a deadlift. They're not, you know, if you swapped out straight leg deadlifts for glute ham raises or something like that, you get a different training effect. You know, and I found a lot better results with the higher specificity movements. So that's kind of the sweet spot that I've settled on. You know, that said, I'm not married to that strategy. I've had a number of lifters who, you know, have a lot of time constraints or have a number of injury issues that are going on that make it just, they can do the competition power lifts, but when you start changing stances and changing grips and stuff like that, injuries start to flare up. So for them, we will train all comp lifts, you know, all the time. So it's still an individualized approach, but kind of my go-to is this approach where we definitely hammer the competition lift. I like to say that's the big rocks in the jar, but we also include some assistance and supplemental lifts as well.
So if you had to pick like one assistance lift for each of the big three, what would they be?
Oh man, that's tough. Like if this was a couple years ago, I would have said like the pause variations of all the lifts. So like pause squat, pause bench, pause deadlift. And I mean, I guess if that's all I knew, you know, about a lifter is just that we need to pick one assistance exercise, then that'd be a pretty safe bet, you know, but I definitely have found people that those variations don't work for as well as others. So, but I definitely do favor the heavier variations. So, like if we're talking about squat, like I mentioned, pause squats, but I also get a lot out of pin squats and safety bar squats and high bar squats and stuff like that as well. Now they're all really heavy variations, very similar to the competition exercise. You know, it's just one small tweak, really, you know, but kind of anything in that realm. And from there, it's kind of a process of tweaking it and figuring out what's going to work best for that individual.
Cool.
I like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. The one question I had was, so we use RPE kind of, I mean, it can be obviously used in the sense that we've already talked about it. To me, it's kind of like it could be like a readiness thing too. So if, you know, weights that shouldn't be such high RPEs are obviously coming in at high RPEs, then maybe readiness is in question a little bit. I've seen you use other things to measure readiness. What else do you guys do there to do that, I guess?
Sure. I was just looking to see if I had my dynamometer handy, but I don't. But that was one thing. I made a Facebook post about that a while ago. Like, you hear people, I'm sure you guys have heard people talk about like the grip test.
Yeah.
You know, like you take a hand dynamometer. And so I've messed around with that. I've messed around with all kinds of stuff. And I haven't found very much that actually measures readiness for powerlifting, that actually correlates with anything. I think the method that you just described is probably going to be your best bet. You know, it's like even bar speed, right? So like I thought, you know, okay, grip dynamometer doesn't work. Vertical jump doesn't work. All these other things that I do don't work. Maybe let's go more specific. Let's get something that's closer to what the competition exercise is like and see if we can measure performance on that and see if that can tell us something about readiness, you know. So what I started to do was measuring performance, measuring bar speed on some of my warm-up sets, you know, and I think specifically I was using like 65% or something like that. So it would be a weight that I would hit every day no matter what the protocol was, if I was doing singles or 10 reps or whatever. Even that didn't correlate, you know. Like if it was way off, then, you know, things might be way off, but you would still get weird results from it from time to time. So I kind of gave up on a lot of the readiness testing at that point. I think that you can get a readiness effect from it, but you just got to go heavier, and it might be 80, 85%. And I think for most people, you know, that's not like a practical thing to be doing that like every session, you know. So from the sound of it, I think what you've got is probably as close as you're going to get to a readiness score, at least for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the major function? Because I still see you using either like a Tendo or a Gym Aware. What's your major goal with measuring the bar speed there?
I'm getting a double check on my RPE, basically. So I know what ranges an RPE 9 should be in, for each lift, and it does vary by lift. But like I'll do a set, and let's say I'll do a set and feel like that was a 9 RPE. So most of the time, that's pretty accurate for me. But sometimes, I'll look at the Tendo and that'll be off a little bit. So what I'll do is if there's a disagreement between my subjective feeling and what, the Tendo shows or what video shows or something like that, I might tweak that RPE rating by like half a point, So it's not a huge tweak, and it's still primarily that subjective experience there in the moment. But having some sort of like an outside gauge can help you be a bit more accurate. Yeah.
I specifically recall like seeing training videos of you like having the Tendo attached to the bar, and it's just more data, more stuff you can analyze to dial in your training.
And I don't know, like I've definitely run the range on that. Like when I first got my Tendo unit, pretty shortly after that, I kind of stopped tracking subjective RPE. Like I would just rely on that Tendo unit, and whatever that said my RPE was is what it was. But over time, I kind of realized that's a mistake. There's something that subjective RPE captures that's a bit more nuanced than just bar speed alone. Bar speed's definitely a major contributor, and it's a fairly accurate measure of the level of effort that's involved, but it's not the only measure, So like if you take a high rep set, and you take a set of say 12 to failure, that 10th rep might still be looking pretty good. The 11th rep looks pretty good, and then that 12th rep, all of a sudden you die. There's something there, and you feel it when you're doing it, and whether that's metabolite buildup or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But it's something that's not really captured in the bar speed by itself.
Yeah, it could be as we've spoken a lot about individualization, and nothing's going to be more individual than your subjective RPE.
Right.
So if that's an important thing to gauge, then I think it's always important to get. We've talked about this on a few shows, but just getting to know your lifters and listening to their feedback. I think at times
absolutely.
I've been like, I've had certain lifters or clients, and just, you start to take their feedback with a grain of salt, because you're like, this person just being a bitch, and this can't be true.
Or they're rating like 6s and 7s when they're like absolute death grinds.
Right, and then you just start, It's like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna listen a little bit more and see what's going on.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely that too. Like the people who, just for whatever reason, can't seem to use that tool. Don't use it. Like if they've shown an inability to use it, then don't. Like if you're building a house and every time you hand one of your workers a saw, he like starts just chopping down random shit, then you would stop handing him the saw,
That would be best course of action, yeah.
Right. But then there's always the ones that, you kind of send training to and they just disappear into a black hole. That's always fun, trying to individualize training for people like that. It's like, man, I gotta have something. Give me something back so I can do my job here,
I've sent sheets to people and they give me back literally everything but the RPE score. So like, I use this weight, this, and this. And even though my explicit instructions were, if you're not going to fill in this sheet very much, if you can just fill in one thing, fill out the RPE score, please. It's like, we're just going to leave that blank.
Yeah.
All right.
That's another thing that we're working toward addressing. And I know that we're not the only people kind of on this path, but I think if you can lower some of the barriers for helping people to log their workouts, then you'll get more compliance. I mean, that's probably obvious, but if you have to write it down in a notebook, and then when you get home you have to log onto the computer and so on, then that's a lot of extra steps. And like only certain people with a certain personality type are going to be able to follow through on that, you know. Now, if you could have it be a lot easier, maybe a mobile app or something like that, and they can kind of log their workout as they go through, then, that's a lot easier, and you'll get a lot more people to comply with it, So, I mean, again, that's kind of stating the obvious, but, I think that's an area that's kind of ripe for some innovation.
Absolutely. I actually have a really good question that I wanted to. I'm calling it really good, even though it's it might suck. It might suck. I have a question that I was really excited to ask that we just built up to. I'll hold it off until we open beer number 2.
Well, you're gonna finish beer number 1.
I'm working on it. This is like 12.7%.
That's the problem with stouts is they're sippers, and this beer may not stand a chance going up against our first one. But we got another Trillium stout. We've got Secret Stairs. This is one of the first Trillium beers I ever tried. Another exceptional stout, and I've used exceptional more times in this podcast than I have in the rest of my adult life combined. But I'm excited for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember the first time we visited Trillium. This was on tap.
Yeah.
Are you a beer guy at all, Mike? You like beer, or?
I like a beer occasionally, and honestly, what you guys are drinking now is probably my speed. I like the darker, heavier beers. I'm not sure how those are on bitterness, but I tend not to be a real bitter guy. More malty is kind of my speed.
Yep, stouts definitely fit that bill, and like the outside the lines, like this, I really got like the vanilla in that. We've kind of gotten away from like describing our beers quite so much because it turns out our listeners like don't give a fuck, which was hugely disappointing to me.
We started the podcast to drink beer. They wanted more strength and conditioning information.
Gotta give them what they want. All right, how about that? Great question.
All right, so. That great question. So we talked about just the ease of being able to log your training session. Could improve everything from compliant to could improve compliance, which is obviously nothing really else matters unless you're compliant and doing your program. So as a guy who tracks so many different things and sweats the details, if you will, and makes a big deal out of small things. If we're gonna, talk to some of our listeners about big picture, like before you start worrying about some of these smaller things, what does your priority list look like? Like big picture, as far as you need to cover your bases here before you start worrying about bar speed or having a perfect RPE score or something like that.
Oh man, good question. That is a good question.
And you're
question,
right.
I think was your phrase, right? Nailed it. So, like you already mentioned, compliance. You've got to actually do the workouts. I'm assuming that if you're listening to a podcast about lifting weights, that's probably not a problem for you. So once you have that nailed down, from there, gosh, I don't know. I guess I would just say paying attention. Paying attention to what your real experiences are. Like there was a phrase that gets tossed around quite a lot, and or at least it used to. How you feel is a lie, and I hate that because it's totally not a lie. Like how you really do feel how you feel. You may be misinterpreting it. Just because you feel like crap one day doesn't necessarily mean you should take the day off. In terms of effects, the people who would say how you feel is a lie, like I get where you're going with it, but I think to use that phrase, it carries with it some unintended consequences, and it tells people that, hey, how you feel is not really relevant, or how you feel is not really reality, when it really is. And I think the solution to it is to get better at interpreting it. So I would say pay attention to what's going on, and if you feel like crap on a certain movement, or maybe you read that rack pulls are like the greatest assistance exercise for you, but every time you do rack pulls your back hurts. Like, don't do rack pulls, right? You'd be amazed at the number of people, or maybe you guys wouldn't be amazed, but just the number of people who need permission or want to ask somebody for permission to not do rack pulls. Like, trust the observations that you make. Every time I do X, Y happens. Well, you've got to go with that because that's the real information as it applies to you. By all means, learn everything you can, be a student of the sport, and try to. I think all the general information that we gather over time, it helps us get a better starting position. So like one thing that I'm working on right now, we're doing personality testing for our lifters, and we want to build a model for that gives us an idea of what kind of training protocols, training directions are going to be best for lifters of differing personality types, just because we think there's something there, so we're looking into it. Now if I have a model, and for most people with X personality type, they need like a high intensity program with lots of high RPE work and rep maxes and stuff like that, but then I give it to this person and they just respond terribly to it, then something has to change, and the training has to conform to the lifter. I have to change the training approach. I can't say to them, well, for your personality type, this really should be working. Like, they don't care about that, like that's not important to them, so models are great, and having that understanding gets you a really good starting point. But after that, it's all about paying attention and allowing the training to adapt to the lifter and not the other way around.
That's cool.
That's really interesting about the personality stuff.
Maybe it's a lot of fun to look into. I mean, I wish I had something meaningful to say about it right now, but so far not very much. We're still kind of in the early stages, which for me tends to be kind of the exciting time, which is why I can't shut up about it.
What I like about so much stuff that you said is it makes so much sense. I like to look at things. I feel like in the fitness industry or in the strength training world, people stay in this bubble of like, well, let's not apply what we've learned from so many other fields into this one, when like already today we've talked about something that businesses have done for ages and ages, which is make sure that they track every friggin' thing that happens at their business, just like you can track everything in your workout, so that you can get something that's repeatable, and that you can have systems. And now even personality tests is like a whole nother realm as well, where let's get our personality tests so we can figure out where you can do your best work in the world, or in this case, let's get a personality test so we can figure out where you can do your best work in the gym. So to me, it makes a ton of sense, because I love applying things that have nothing to do with fitness to fitness. Because
I'm the same way. I think that kind of drawing in ideas from different fields like that, I think that's where the real creativity happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's the personality test that you like? Is it called like the Colby test?
The Colby test.
Yeah.
The Colby test is more about your instincts. I don't know if you've taken that one.
I have actually. Yeah. I've definitely looked at the Colby. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Go ahead.
I'm a huge fan of that, especially from like if you're going to work with other people and you're going to delegate jobs amongst your staff, or something like in your case with the military too, if you're going to have to delegate things to people and rely on them, like I learned the Colby test obviously through the book Traction that we read. Put the right person in the right seat, and if the right person's in the right seat, a lot of good things can happen.
It's a great book. That's a great book. And I think the Colby's really interesting as well. Less a personality test and more just kind of, like you said, like figuring out your instincts specifically about work. I think from a business standpoint, it's really great. You've got to. One thing about testing anything is you've got to make sure that the test is measuring the thing that you want to know. And a lot of times the easiest way to do that is directly. Like, if I want to know how tall the ceiling is, like, I could take a little ball bearing up to the top of the ceiling and drop it and measure how long it takes for it to fall, and then do some algebra and figure out, the distance. Or I could use a tape measure, use the tape measure, So if you want to, like, I think if you're looking at a business application, you're trying to, like you said, put the right person in the right seats, like something like a Colby test makes a lot of sense, because it measures those things that you're interested in at that point. In some of the the preliminary looks that we've been doing in personality, we've been looking at the Big Five test, primarily because it seems to be the most scientifically valid. So we figured, well, let's start there. So it's an interesting test. It measures your personality across 5 dimensions, and each one's like a sliding scale, right? So there's openness, like openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So, I mean, there's like an infinite number of combinations almost, obviously not actually infinite, but each one on the test that I use is measured on like a percentile score. So for me, for example, I think I'm just as an example, like I rate really high on conscientiousness, and then there's like a subset of things underneath conscientiousness, which is like orderliness, cautiousness, industriousness, and a couple other things I can't remember off the top of my head. But you may be high in one of those things, but not other things, and so you start to dig into this a little bit more, and you gain a picture of like what kind of personality does the person have. And something that I thought was interesting, so we sent this out to all the lifters on our team and had them do these Big Five tests. And when I had them filling out the questionnaire, I asked them what their percentile score was for each one, and like whether they thought that was an accurate rating or not, and so on. And then at the very end, I had a field for additional comments. There's not really any additional comments to be made. It's a pretty straightforward questionnaire. So most people didn't make additional comments, but a few people did. And I thought the comments that were made were really interesting in light of the personality. Yeah. So like, apparently I had a spelling error on my form, and someone like corrected the spelling error. They're like, well, there's only one R in that word, you know? And so I look at their personality, and they're like super low in agreeableness, you know? Or like, you get like these long additional comments of people who are like, you know, this is all well and good, but I don't think this test is really an accurate reflection of me, who I am as a person. I'm much more deep and nuanced than this, and on and on and on and on. Invariably, that person is high in neuroticism, yep. You know? So like, it's just interesting to see like how different aspects of a person's personality will shine through. So I do think that there's probably some training differences. Not the Big Five, but there's another personality test that's been correlated to different like resting levels of various neurotransmitters. So we know that there's some physiological differences that show up. It's probably that physiological differences cause changes in personality, but you know, if we look at one, we can infer the other. So anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing to look at. So it's not just psychology. There's probably some physiological differences between these people as well.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I have to dig a little deeper into that Big Five.
Yeah. You know, but I think what's cool about now a few of the things we've talked about today is these are common things. We've brought on a host of different coaches and different lifters, and they're the same topics that we've talked about. But your team is thinking about ways to systemize it and actually get data for it, which is in line with what you guys do.
Right.
Which
that's my personality.
yeah, there you go. You know, we've said before, like, you do have a lot of different ways to skin the cat, as far as if you're going to be like a totally just, you know, competition lifts, waving volume type guy, or are you going to be a guy that's a little higher intensity up front with a lot more accessory work off the back, and it does fit different types of people. Like, absolutely, you and I together, we like to lift in different ways. And now if we go full circle to compliance, if you can fit lifting that you actually like foam at the mouth to do each day, then you're going to get much better results.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, and I saw a Facebook post, which nothing can piss anybody off like Facebook, but someone was lamenting the amount of mental preparation that some lifters need to do to go under a maximum lift. And like, well, when I do it, I don't have to do all that. I'm here because I want to be here, and I just get under the bar and I lift it. And it's like, okay, neat, but like, you don't, like, it's like it never occurred to this person that, you know, there are personality differences here, and that may be one super obvious way that those personality differences are going to shine through. Some people are highly ritualized, or maybe they've got to really get themselves into an aggressive state of mind because naturally they're just really high in anxiety, and they've got to mask that with something, you know, otherwise they're just a nervous little bundle of anxiety as they approach the bar, you know. And then you have other people who are maybe really low in neuroticism and really low in extroversion, so they just don't really feel a whole lot of emotion at any time. They're just not emotional people. And so for a person like that, which I tend to fall a little bit more into that category, for me to go to a competition, there's already a lot of stimulation. And then if I try to get psyched up on top of that, it's just too much, you know, and it's uncomfortable, it's unfocused, it doesn't feel good, you know. So of course there's going to be some personality differences, and it's just stupid to me to deride one kind of lifter or another when, like, it's just so obvious that, you know, that it's a individual variance, you know.
Absolutely.
That segues perfectly into a question I've been wanting to ask you for a long time, Mike, and that is, why do you train all by yourself with like no music? Yeah, anyone who's seen your Instagram or any of your videos, you know, knows that you train by yourself, you know, limited equipment, and I'm just blown away by with how kind of like stoic you are with your training. Explain to us how that came about and how it's benefited you as a lifter.
Well, I've gone through a lot of different phases. So I mentioned earlier when I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy, we had a powerlifting team. So when I trained then, I definitely had training partners. I had people that were around all the time, good friends of mine that I still keep in touch with, some of them. But, you know, so kind of that early formative stage was definitely around other lifters. When I left, I moved to California, and the area of California that I was living in had like zero powerlifters, like zero people who were serious about it, no gym. So I was training at the base gym, and, you know, whatever they had on the stereo is what they had on the stereo. Whatever equipment they had, that's what they had, you know. And you just lift weights because what else are you gonna do, you know? But I remember this one time they were doing some renovations, and they moved all the weight equipment outside under this big tent. You know, so it's California, so you can do that. But so they're doing all these renovations inside. So I went outside and I'm lifting, and like everybody else, they're just like regular people. They're like, I don't want to lift outside, you know. So they didn't. They left, you know. So I'm out there by myself, just lifting weights, and it's just totally dead quiet. And I was like, this is awesome. Just something about it just really resonated with me. So for a long time after that, I trained without any music or anything. And then as the years went by, I kind of softened that quite a bit. You know, like nowadays I have music on. I don't feel like I rely on it, but I've trained by myself in the basement for so long that it's like, okay, that's a lot of days and hours spent down here alone. I should probably bring in something else. So, you know, I definitely have music nowadays, and even to the point now where there's a good gym that's not far from me. I still train out of my basement a lot just because it's convenient, but I try to make it down there a couple times a week. It's a good gym. There's other good lifters and just like-minded people, and I think it's good to be around them. You know, that's something that I didn't take advantage of earlier on, and I wish I had, so I'm making good on that now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we talk a lot about the importance of training environment, but like I know I spent probably like 2.5, 3 years of my training career training pretty much by myself, and one thing I learned from it was to train submaximally. You know, if you can't get a bench handoff, if you can't get a spot, you know, on the bench or the squat, like you got to make intelligent training decisions. Would you say that it's helped you with that?
Yeah, I mean, safety is a big concern, right? Like, I don't know about you, I've definitely had a couple close calls. They could have gone the other way.
You're also handling a hell of a lot more weight than I have.
Well,
let's be clear.
Honestly, all the close calls that I've had have been because I did something stupid. You know, like I was doing board presses with the safety pins set at like the normal bench height. You know, like that was dumb. You know, and but like even at that, like all those were like super early on in my career. You have a couple near misses and you go, like, there was no one else here. Like, someone else was going to have to come and find me, and who knows when that would be. And you go, maybe I'll pay more attention to safety, So like for anybody that trains by themselves, like I really harp on and emphasize safety. Like you can train by yourself and have it be safe. Using the safety pins is probably your best weapon for that. But having an exit strategy for what happens if I miss this, or what happens if I get injured in the middle of the set or something like that. Like not dwelling on it, but knowing what you're going to do. Like I think that's important. You don't want to have something happen and go, oh crap, I didn't set the safeties and I have collars on the bench, and so now what am I going to do? You're just kind of SOL at that point.
Yeah.
The time to think about it's before something happens.
Or you can come up with quite a few jerry-rig type contraptions that I've seen you make as well to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, most recently on my Instagram, I was wanting to do some low incline benches. I don't have an adjustable incline at my house anymore, so I took my flat bench and like propped it up on a box. So it was a nice low, like a 15-degree incline, but it's a bench propped up on a box, and like there's another board running across, so like the leg drive doesn't shove the bench off the box, but man, people were really nervous for me on that one, which understandably so. Like I can't blame them. Like when you look at it, it does look pretty sketchy, but at the same time, like I did check it all out, and it's nothing's gonna happen, but I can understand why you'd be nervous just seeing that.
I love it. As a fellow person who tries to like look in the gym and be like, all right, how can I make this like how can I take this weird plastic step over here and these bars and make a dip stand? All right, this is gonna work.
Exactly, man. Exactly. Like there's a lot to be said for creativity in the gym, I think. Obviously some limits to that, but just making good use of what you've got. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Awesome. One question I wanted to ask as we wind down here, we're almost done, is I guess our viewership is, largely a lot of people that are just getting into powerlifting, might be doing one of their first meets ever. So a topic that we always ask various people on here and we discuss a lot is, that first meet or getting started. As someone that had a first meet a long time ago and has coached, a lot of people through their first meets, I'm sure. What's some sound advice you would give for somebody going into meet number one?
Open lower than you think you need to. Like take whatever it is that you think you're going to open with and probably knock 5% off of that, and I don't know, that's maybe not great advice for everybody, but it's safe advice, right? Like you will see some people who are just naturally more neurotic people, and they're a bit more conservative in their weight selection, maybe more than they ought to be. But from a guy who bombed out of my first competition, you don't want that. You don't want that to be your experience. So if you can, if you're thinking like, I got this, let's open 5% less. You can take some bigger jumps, and there will be many more competitions to come. But I would throw in some other things too, like understanding the rules, and that stuff is really important. I would definitely encourage you to do what you can to understand the rules before you go to a meet. But I also understand that the people who probably need that advice the most aren't going to do it.
That's a great point.
It's just a temperament thing. Like I've got a friend of mine. I don't know if you guys know Matt Gary, but he talks about like when he went to his first competition, like he read the rule book like all the way through, went to a competition just to watch, and like did all this research and stuff. Now, when I looked at his personality type, like he's really high in conscientiousness. He's exactly the kind of guy who would do something like that. You take somebody who's like the 20th percentile for conscientiousness, they just won't be able to will themselves to do it. So there's just a temperament difference there. So I would say understand your learning style too. Like, I know for myself, I like to get information from talking to people, especially more nuanced information. I tend to do better just talking to people. So if that's you, then talk to an experienced lifter and figure out what the flow of the meet's going to be. If you're like a person that likes to read a lot, then read the rule book. So you've got to figure it out one way or another. Figure it out in a way that's best for you, but figure it out, I guess, is the ending advice there.
Awesome. So whether it's load on the bar or learning style or whatever, a lot of it comes down to individualization. That seems to be the take-home message from this whole chat.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. Like, I feel like it's not a real great soundbite, but that's like my real opinion on it.
But that's what I've always come to love from your guys' work, and when I think reactive training systems, that's what I think. Like reacting to each person based on outputs and who they are and things like that. So
awesome. Well, thank you.
Cool.
That's good. That means we're kind of doing what we want to do there. So that's good. Thanks.
So,
absolutely.
Mike, if people want to find out more about you, more about Reactive Training Systems and what you do, where can they find you?
I would say the best place to start is the Reactive Training Systems website. Again, it's reactivetrainingsystems.com. There's the suite of free apps that are there. They're all web applications. You can also sign up for the newsletter there, which I send emails that just have links to articles that I write or podcasts that I do and things like that. And then some content that I don't share in other places. But if you're more of a social media type, I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram tends to be pretty much all about my training, but I tend to have more, theoretical thoughts and stuff like that on Facebook. So, and both of those are just under Mike Tuchscherer. So, good luck spelling the last name. But
it was a hell of a morning for me.
I know you had to check it a couple times.
Like, how many CHs are in this? All right.
Well, Mike, we really appreciate you coming on. This was a absolutely phenomenal show. I think I learned a ton. Selfishly, I got a lot out of this myself. I know we both looked up to you a lot as a coach and a lifter for a long time, so we appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thanks guys for having me. It was fun to chat with you guys. Fun for me. I don't know about the other listeners. It's fun for me to hear about the beers too. So
absolutely, yeah. If you're ever in Boston, we will treat you to some great beers.
Excellent.
Yeah. So save up those random beers for that.
There you go. Great.
Stuff that listeners need to know about. Housekeeping notes.
Housekeeping notes on the Strength House end is. August 20th, we have the Big 3 seminar. We have a couple of spots left for that at Cressy Sports Performance. So that's a Sunday, August 20th. You can find more information by following the link in my bio at the Strength House on Instagram. Anything else? That's it for right now. Thank you so much for tuning in and sticking with us for 20 episodes. We hope we have 20 more. Thank you, Mike, again for your time tonight. It was a pleasure and a lot of awesome information, some really cool discussions. We will see you guys next week, same time, same place. Good evening.
Good night.